Well, hello, it's Yasser El-Ansary here, the Chief Executive at the Australian Investment Council. It's an absolute pleasure for me to be with you at Wholesale Investors Venture and Capital event this year. We're doing it virtually, of course, as most events are today, but it's a really important opportunity for us to have a discussion, to have a dialogue about the state of venture capital investment and the early stage investment ecosystem here in Australia right now. Many of you will know the Australian Investment Council has had a long history in the venture ecosystem, as well as the private equity and growth capital ecosystem. Our old identity was AVCAL, the Australian Private Equity and Venture Capital Association. A couple of years ago, we changed our identity to recognise the evolution and the change that's taking place within private capital investment, not just here in Australia, but indeed right around the world. Today, venture and early stage investment is in a really strong position in this market. It continues to accelerate and go from strength to strength, which I think is tremendously exciting. COVID-19 has, of course, forced every investor and indeed every business owner and founder to risk assess the way they operate, to think carefully about the way they do business. How can we manage the downsides to the greatest extent possible? And indeed, how do we capitalise on the upside opportunities created by this global pandemic? The public health crisis arising from the pandemic is very challenging and, of course, has been really saddening for us to see. Loss of life, the people whose lives have been impacted in a really significant and profound way is, of course, very sad and disappointing to see. On the business side, the role of innovation coming out of this pandemic has never been more important. If you think about our day-to-day life and the way that innovation has suddenly become more relevant to each and every one of us, you'll appreciate the reasons why. Everyone now right across the community better understands the importance of technology in order to allow us all to continue to get on with our life as best as we possibly can. And what that means for investors is that the access to global innovation through this particular asset class, the venture capital investment asset class, is particularly strong. And we see that here in the Australian market and indeed right around the world. In 2020, to give you an illustration of this, we saw more than US $300 billion worth of capital invested through venture all over the world. That's remarkable when you think about the scale and volume of capital that represents. And if you're interested, that $300 billion milestone was second only to 2018, where the record was set for the highest level in history at around about US $330 billion in deployed capital through venture. What's really interesting about this is that Asia is becoming a more significant driver of that capital being deployed into venture in a global context. And I think that's really interesting. We know that economically there is a power shift underway where Asia is competing for its share of the global economy as against traditional established markets in North America and indeed in Europe. But in a venture context, this hasn't always been the case, certainly not up until recently at least. But now we are seeing some of the world's biggest venture deals being closed in key markets across Asia and within China in particular. And that marks, I think, a very significant step change from where we've been over the recent past. Here in Australia, closer to home, in 2020, we saw aggregate new capital raised of around about $1.3 billion, which is the highest ever on record in our local market. That's something we're really proud of. That fundraising is really being driven by large commitments from institutional level investors, such as superannuation funds and sovereign wealth funds. And that in itself signals something really important. It signals their desire and their hunger to access the innovation ecosystem. And it marks, I think, a significant step change from where we've been over the past decade. When you have large institutional investors like our superannuation funds making significant commitments of capital into strategies like venture, I think it's something we should all sit up and take notice of. It means that they're seeing the profound impact of innovation in our economy, not just today, but into the future. For institutional and indeed for wholesale investors, venture continues to present a really compelling investment strategy. You all know that. That's why you're a part of this event, of course. But if you needed that reassurance, I can give it to you. The pipeline of investment opportunities for skilled fund managers continues to be exceptionally strong here in Australia. There's certainly no risk that the capital being allocated into venture will exhaust great quality deal opportunities anytime soon. The returns that we're seeing through well-designed venture investment programs is also exceptionally strong. But as with any investment strategy, it's vitally important that you continue to do your diligence well to ensure that you're selecting managers who can deliver the best and most sustainable and repeatable investment performance that you want from investing into venture. We have a tremendously strong ecosystem of venture managers here in Australia, and it's becoming stronger and stronger every day. I know, in fact, that you're going to be hearing from some of our best and brightest throughout this Wholesale Investor event over the next few days. For founders and entrepreneurs who are looking to access investment capital, everything I just spoke about is as equally important to you as well. There is a significant lift in the volume of capital looking to be deployed into exceptional and great startup businesses all over the economy. The sectors that continue to attract significant volumes of investment capital include ICT and digital technology, of course. FinTech in particular is really grabbing a significant share of that investment capital being deployed into ICT and digital. Software as a service businesses are attracting large amounts of capital, as are businesses in the payment technology area. You only need to look at the significant change that's played out for businesses such as Afterpay and other market competitors who are seeking to follow in Afterpay's big footsteps. Consumer discretionary facing businesses are also continuing to do really well, despite what you might think on the surface that bricks and mortar retail is declining. Online consumer discretionary retail is accelerating and doing really, really well. It's propelled by the accelerated shift that we've seen towards online retail as a result of the pandemic. Some of the sectors to watch out for over the period ahead include areas such as agtech, areas such as employment and HR technology businesses, and indeed regtech businesses. All of these sectors have attracted what I would describe as modest levels of capital over the recent years, but I absolutely expect that to change in the period ahead as we rebound out of the economic downturn that we've experienced here in Australia, and indeed most developed economies have experienced around the world. When it comes to the investment capital that's being deployed through venture funds here in the Australian market, we have seen over the past 12 months Series A funding rounds decrease slightly. That's a function really of the fact that venture funds are raising larger amounts of capital, and therefore they need to make more meaningful and larger commitments to the investments that they make through their larger funds. But that's not something to be concerned about. That growth in the more mature and established end of the market is creating big opportunities for smaller VC funds. Some refer to them as micro VC funds, to establish and take a foothold in the innovation ecosystem. They're really stepping in and growing the base of capital that's available to be invested at both seed and Series A stage. And that's something that will become great news for entrepreneurs right across our market. It's a fantastic time to be engaged in the innovation ecosystem here in Australia. Whether you're an investor looking to support the next homegrown Australian startup that will go on to become a best-in-class leader in a particular sector, or indeed whether you're an entrepreneur with a pocket full of ideas in the world at your fingertips, it's a really exciting time. The thing that makes all of that worthwhile, beyond the dollars, beyond the returns, and beyond the accolades, is the very real difference that innovation is making to our life every single day. In fact, later today, I challenge you to do this. When you have a moment with your thoughts, think about how innovation and technology has fundamentally transformed every single thing you do throughout the day. From the moment you wake up to your last moment awake for that day, you'll be amazed at the role of innovation when you add all of that up. All of that is only possible through the commitment of investors and the amazing entrepreneurs who dream up those crazy ideas that we never thought of. Where would we be today if we didn't have the combination of both? Enjoy the rest of this Wholesale Investor event. The work that Steve and his team do is so important, and I know that you will all enjoy every moment of this online event over the next few days. I'm so pleased to have been able to play just a small part of it. I hope you've enjoyed this session. Thank you.